Hi, I'm Dieter Bradbury, an editor here at the Press Herald. With me is Steve Mistler, our political writer. It's the day before the election, and a lot of Mainers are probably relieved to be at this point, but a lot of candidates are still out campaigning, including Mike Michaud, who's out with Angus King at this very moment. Tell us what you think about Senator King's impact on the race at this point.
Well, it could. What political science professors usually say is that endorsements don't matter that much, but King's endorsement, particularly at this late stage in the game, and particularly because he originally endorsed independent candidate Elliott Cutler, could have an impact, particularly with Cutler coming out and saying, well, not really quite dropping out, but also not quite conceding, but also saying, look, if I know that I'm a long shot to win, so if you feel the need to leave me and vote for somebody else, do so. So he says that in the morning, and Angus King comes out and says in the afternoon, basically saying that Mike Michaud has the best chance to win. That could have an impact in this migration of Elliott Cutler's supporters, if there is one. And I think the question becomes for Mike Michaud in particular is how big is that migration? If it's 50% of Cutler's supporters or more, he's probably in very good shape. If it's less, in a race this close, it may not be enough.
So while Angus King is campaigning with Mike Michaud, we're about to see New Jersey Governor Chris Christie back in Maine for something like the fifth time, I believe, campaigning on behalf of Governor LePage. Why are we seeing so much of Chris Christie?
Well, he's said all along, I mean, the first time he came back, he came to Maine back in, I think it was April or May, that Maine was a priority for him. In fact, if you look at the Republican Governors Association's map, nationally, Maine is a target state, which means even though it's a defensive position for the RGA, it's a state where they think they have a good chance of winning. And it also, I think, perhaps reflects the fact that the Governor LePage has been he has carried, I don't want to say the water, but he's pushed a lot of the issues that the Republican Governors Association wants, and he has become a bit of a model for the RGA, which would make sense given that. So if you have a tight race like we have, and a governor who has been responsive to the RGA's sort of platform, you have the recipe for a lot of Chris Christie visits, as you've mentioned. There's been 5 of them so far, including one on the eve of Election Day.
A lot of people have framed this election for governor as a referendum on Paul LePage. A lot of attention has been devoted to the governor's public statements. Some people describe them as embarrassing, controversial, a lot of negative things to say about his public behavior. It seems to me that perhaps less has been said about his policy initiatives. Right. Do you think that the Democrats in particular have put enough focus on what Governor LePage has done in his 4 years in the Blaine House?
Well, I think that's an open question. I think they have certainly run against LePage. That is the core of their message. The question is that enough, as you just said? I don't know. I think it's easier to message a referendum against the incumbent than it is to, say, dig into policy proposals, some of which may not be all that helpful to Democrats, such as welfare reform, which the public is divided on. They don't have a clear winning strategy on welfare reform, whereas the governor has embraced that and run with it, and apparently with the idea or believing that is a winning issue for him. The question becomes, as you noted, is that running against LePage enough? It was enough in the 2013 legislative elections. That was a core of the Democratic messaging then. They believe it is now. The question is has Mike Michaud basically given voters enough to oust an incumbent, which hasn't happened here in a very, very long time.
Many people are saying that this referendum is going to hinge on turnout. Which party does a better job of getting their core supporters to the polls tomorrow? Do you agree with that?
I do. I think most of the polls show this as a deadlocked race, and if that's the case, it's all about get out the vote. And the Democrats have been giving us a couple of sneak peeks at that operation. It's very sophisticated. It's huge. They've spent a lot of money on it. the question is that enough? They believe that it is enough to take Congressman Michaud over the finish line. We haven't seen as much of the Republican operation as we'd like to, but I suspect that it is well funded, just as the Democrats is. The question is that going to be enough, and do they need it? They have some inherent tide at their back, if you will, which is this midterm election, which tends to favor Republicans when their party is not in the White House, and also the bear baiting referendum, which we don't know the impact of that, but it will turn out voters in the rural district, rural 2nd Congressional District, where Governor LePage is already very strong.
You've written a number of stories about the amount of money that's flowing into this race, both from the candidates and from outside groups. Where is this money coming from, and what are the people or the groups that are giving going to expect in return?
Well, that's the money is coming from all over the place, which is reflective of, I think, the national interest in the race. We have groups from D.C., we have groups from California, we have groups from all over dumping money, $11.5 million as of last count, into the governor's race alone, and then another over $2 million into legislative contests. This is a record, and the question becomes, what's the policy payoff when the winner is decided? We don't know yet, but we know that labor interests have bankrolled the Democratic effort here, and that the Republican Governors Association is the chief financier of the Republican effort, particularly in the governor's race, and that the Republican Governors Association is a nonprofit. So we certainly see people who have given money to them, but there are ways for them to not disclose who their funders are. But big corporations, industries like Koch Industries are all part of the RGA's biggest funders according to their finance reports. So the question becomes, what is the policy payoff here in Maine? And we've seen some of that over the first 4 years of Governor LePage's term. The question is what's next? And we'll have to wait and see.
Lots of questions still, and in a day or two we'll have the answers. Thanks very much, Steve.
Thanks.